welcome to the Work Hard People's Podcast. This is the Coach's Corner edition, and today we're going to focus on the big three. That's what I like to call it anyway, which is bench press, squats, and deadlifts. I'm James, the old guy. I have Matt freaking Deakins with me, Mr. Powerlifter Extraordinaire. How you doing today?
I'm great, James. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for joining me with this. Matt, actually, we're going to have some videos on here as well that Matt actually did for us so that we can see proper form and go over proper technique. And I do want to thank everybody for that has been following and subscribing and liking. I'm grateful for all of you out there that are taking time to check us out. I hope we're putting out good content and getting that good information to you. So today, as we focus on the big three, where this really comes from me was my grandson. He loves to come to the gym with me from time to time, and he's 8. And I'll be curling, and he's like, I want to do that. And I have a philosophy when I'm dealing with people that are brand new in the gym, especially younger kids that are just starting to train. I do think it's good to train, but I think that single joint movements are a recipe for disaster when you're brand new and you're young because the ligaments and the tendons are not strong enough yet. And when you're doing a single joint movement, what's a single joint movement? A curl, a tricep extension with one arm. Anytime just one joint is involved, like a leg extension, you're just only the knee joints involved. And usually with those type of people that are just starting out training, I always incorporate the main part of their training is the big three. And it's for a couple reasons. Number one, they're multi-joint exercises. Number two, we're able to start very light and make sure that they're doing proper technique. And number three, those three exercises will literally work almost every single muscle in your body. They strengthen ligaments and tendons. They strengthen everything. I mean, and we're going to go over that a little bit, but I want to get your opinion, Matt, on this. The big three.
Yeah, so that's you bring up a good point about single joint exercises for beginners. And while that's great to, first of all, first things first, it's great that they want to be there. It's great that they want to be in the gym, and it's great that they want to get better and do something to challenge themselves or do something different. I agree with you from the perspective of single joint exercises for beginners is kind of like putting lipstick on a pig, for example. You're going there to curl for what purpose? For vanity purpose. You're not doing anything. You're not strengthening anything. And quite frankly, whether you're doing a leg extension, a leg curl, a bicep curl, a forearm curl, a tricep extension, none of those are going to help you in a situation that you might need to get into. For example, none of those are going to help you run away from a bear. None of those are going to help you if you get trapped between something to push something away or move something. None of those, that's not going to help you in any way, which is why I think the big three are so valuable. Yes, how often do you need to like bench press a car off you when it's crushing you and you're working underneath it? Of course not, right? But you could be in a situation where you need to use your legs to press away. Well, guess what the squat is doing? It's in essence doing the same thing. Same with the deadlift. You're pushing the bar away from the floor, right? It's those kind of instances and those three exercises that I think recruit so much more than any single joint's going to.
Yeah, and they help to build overall strength, and then you can take that strength and move into single joint exercises to develop the entire body. I'm not saying that single joint exercises are bad by any means. I just think that it's very important that we focus on making sure that we're proficient and have some type of strength in those main three exercises, and then the other ones we use as accessories. So
Absolutely.
we'll start out with chest, right? So just the bench or the bench press. When you think about the bench press, you're thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna build my chest. Let's look at the muscles that are involved in the bench press. Your core is involved. Yes, your chest is involved. Your front delts, your triceps, your lats when engaging the chest correctly, all of those muscles get involved. Your forearm stabilizer muscles, grip pressure, everything to maintain that bar from rolling or any of that stuff. So all of that stuff is incorporated into the bench press. So it's not your joints. You're using your elbows are involved, your shoulders are involved. So it's not a single joint exercise by any means, and it develops that overall pressing movement. Whether and it helps in all things, whether it be a incline press, a flat bench press. Um, before we're gonna kick this over to Matt, but before we do that, let's watch Matt. Matt did a little 2-minute video here on the bench press and proper form. Let's take a look at that.
All right, so we're going to talk about the bench press today. And one of the big 3 lifts: squat, bench, deadlift. Bench here, a couple things to keep in mind. You got a bench here to lay on, you got a ground here to plant on, and the bar is moving, right? So you have to think of your body as the center, right? You want to get back on the bench, get your upper back on the bench. Do you need a crazy arch for standard bench press? No. You need a strong base down, you need a strong plant in your upper back. When you grab the bar, there's 3 different places you can grab it. Close grip, say medium grip, wide grip. All have 3 different purposes. I say for standard, go kind of a neutral grip, stacked over the shoulder. So you unrack, you get it almost like right in nipple line, almost. You'll pinch your lats down, drop your arms down, squeezing your lats all the way down till you touch just below the nipple on the sternum, and press up. Drop it down, touch, press. And the press should be a full extension. It's a engagement here in the lower. It's a push, almost pushing the bench away from the bar, but the bar is moving. And your upper back should be squeezed and tight the whole time. It's a driving of the lats, squeezing of the pecs, and stability in the shoulders. So, big things to warm up. Shoulders. Shoulders need warmed up definitely when you're doing the bench press. Yes, some people think the bench press is a chest exercise. It can be if you strategically isolate it. But without that isolation, it's a whole upper body, and including your lats, your upper back, your shoulders, and your chest, and a lot of tricep. So make sure you get good and warmed up. Warm up the shoulders, maybe some overhead press, maybe some light dumbbell bench, some tricep extensions. I like to do face pulls, whether it's with a band or with a rope, and get that whole upper body loosened up, because if you're up on your back, upper back, and squeezing tight, and that's not warmed up, it's just gonna be a struggle, because you're gonna lose engagement in your whole upper back, so you're not gonna be able to feel it. So those are the big keys. Remember, plant on the ground, push the bench away from the bar as the bar is moving up, and squeeze everything you wanna work. If you wanna work the chest, set yourself up almost in like a decline position where everything is tight, and all you have to do is you can feel the chest moving. It's not moving the arms at all. You're literally engaging the full pecs. If you want it to be a strength or power movement, it's a drive away from the bar, away from the ground, while firmly planted on the ground. So, have a great day.
Okay, I have to say, Matt, I love the pants. Pants are fantastic, brother. And I have that hoodie, but let's get into it now. So, go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing, the things that ring most proficiently with me when it comes to the bench press is getting warmed up. Right. Most people think you're going to do the bench or you're going to do chest. Now, you can look at this before you start. You can look at this in 2 different ways, right? You can listen from a hypertrophy standpoint, where if you're bodybuilding or you're wanting to look good naked per se, or you could do it as the strength athlete side, right? So going to mix a little here and try not to get too towards the strength athlete like I am. So I'm going to try to keep it neutral here.
Yeah, this is pressing for beginners for
Exactly.
all intents and purposes. Just
Exactly.
The basics.
So the one thing that is key to all of this is getting properly warmed up. That I think is so underrated. First thing, people walk in a gym at 5 o'clock on Monday, International Chest Day. And first thing they're like, oh, I better get to that bench before five other people getting there, right?
Yeah.
Um, when really, you know what? Let them have that. Take 20 to 30 minutes and really loosen your body up. Loosen up your core. Do some light shoulder movements. Do some tricep extensions. Do some lower back movements. Get your upper whole trunk and up. Get all that nice and warm. Do you need to bust a sweat and look like you just did a CrossFit WOD? No, but it, my warm up is usually 100 reps of 4 or 5 different exercises just to get ready to start warming up on the bench press.
Hmm.
And I do all of that more as a first of all get my joints firing, get my muscles firing, but also a safety thing. Last thing you want to do is hop on a bench and be like, oh, I got this, and next thing you know, there goes your rotator cuff, your front delt is killing you, all of that because let's be honest, more times than not, when people start to bench press, it's all front delts because they're
Yeah.
lack of understanding of how to actually engage the pack, if that's
Hmm.
what you're going for, right?
Correct.
So, properly warming up both the front and the back and everything from there on down the chain is essential. And I think that is very underrated with most people.
No, it's super important. Usually, like with my athletes and even myself, right? It's usually 5 minutes on the treadmill just to get the blood pumping. There's then rotator cuff exercises in. There's a great machine at our gym where you can literally like hold the cable like this and do rotation, right? So out and in as well as up to really get the rotator cuff and that shoulder joint all loosened up. And then it will be followed by usually a little bit of some light tricep extensions to get blood in the tricep, with a couple sets of lat pull downs just to warm up that back and get the lats engaged, and then excuse me, some like Y raises, right? Just to really get that shoulder flexion going. And then we start to kind of warm up on the bench and get the chest warmed up before we really get into doing our sets.
Yeah, and the one another big thing is when you're doing your bench, and I know I highlight this in the video a little bit, is whether it's the bench press or one of the other ones, is as the heavier it gets, the more the form's going to break down, right?
Yes.
So is heavier always better? No. Um, you can definitely focus on getting heavier as your form progresses over time.
Hmm.
But make sure, just because you're benching, 135, 95, 135, 185, somewhere in there, that doesn't mean that you're any less superior than some dude lifting with his ego 2 benches down.
Correct.
All independent upon what your goals are. And as a beginner, your goal should be to learn the movement, recruit the most muscle you can, and to do it safely.
Hmm.
So, one other thing that's very underrated is make sure you have a spotter with you. Or if you're
Yeah.
going to bench by yourself, get in a rack, get in somewhere where you have spotting arms.
Yep.
Last thing you want to do is have to dump the weight or shimmy it off you because you
I've been
lift
there,
it
man.
with your ego and not with
Yeah.
what actually the point of you doing is.
I have actually had to do that before, and it is not fun and dangerous.
Yes, it is.
Very.
It's not fun. And I was using one of the multi-handlebars one time on a floor press and got pinned. And, when you're on the floor, you can't shimmy off a bench. There's nothing,
Yeah.
just literally just how can I slide out of here and not crush my face? Um,
Yeah.
but nevertheless, bench presses are very fun to do. And it's really, it's one of the biggest lifts that stroke the ego the most
Yeah.
because
How much? What
how
does
much can
everybody
you
say? How
throw?
much you bitch?
How much you bench?
How
Oh,
much you
bench and
bitch?
curls, bench and curls, right?
Yeah.
But let's you can do that and you can look good from benching. And there's
Hmm.
nothing to say you can't. Just have to use your brain with it.
100%. And if you notice, folks, in the video, one of the things I love that you did was you talked about it from the floor up. You talked about planting, getting the slight arch in the back. The reason for the slight arch in the back, people, is listen, remember, there are a couple things here. Number one, anytime the back is rounded, it's going to happen in some instances. We've talked about that before. But anytime that back is rounded, it creates space between the vertebrae, which can set you up for injury, right? It can put you in a position where the disc can slip, and that's when you get hurt. But by planting in the floor, locking the back in place, pressing the scapula into the bench, right? And getting in position, it allows you to be in a safe position. It gets the shoulders back so that you're not like trying to push with all of shoulders, right? When you can get the shoulders back behind you a little bit, it gets them in a protected zone. And then you compress with all of that upper body, with the chest, the triceps, the shoulders, everything engages and it starts at the floor.
Yes, and that's a very good point because when you get your scaps pulled back, I mean, even just sitting here listening to this, just pinch your shoulder blades together. What
Hmm.
happens, right? Your chest punches out or puffs out.
Yep.
Now now when you press, you have got that really set up for use. And yes, that and your lats, they sit right on top of each other. So
Yep.
as one stretches, one's contracting, and as one stretches, the other contracts. And guess what? That's why you train both sides of your body. Because as you do lat and back warm-ups, guess what? You're also now preparing that to be able to handle the load that you want to work your chest.
Correct. Correct. So yeah, it's important. It's like I said, it's a great upper body front upper body exercise that's going to engage several different muscle groups and help you get overall strength. It's going to prepare you to do the other accessory exercises that come into play, tricep extensions, um, shoulder press, things like that. It's going to help you develop overall strength, and it's very good for beginners to really get into that, just to really start to develop overall strength, strengthen the rotator cuff, strengthen those ligaments and tendons. Because honestly, people, that is where most injuries occur. Is going to be in a ligament or a tendon. You'll get micro tears in the muscle and stuff, but those aren't as bad as when you start snapping or hurting ligaments and tendons. The other thing to keep in mind, especially if you're out there training, if you're wanting to work with your kids or whatever, I need you guys to remember this because it's very, very important. The human body does not grow all at once. Okay. Do not forget that. A lot of times, what happens with the body, especially in children, even all the way up into their teenage years, the ligaments will grow to allow room for the bones to then grow and the muscle to grow. When that happens, there can be what I call slop, a little looseness, because the ligaments and tendons have extended to allow for the growth of the bones. And if that happens and you put too much pressure in that, that's when you're going to dislocate something or in a joint and have a major joint injury. And I actually learned this with my daughter who had a condition growing up that was called nursemaid's elbow. And what nursemaid's elbow is exactly that. And that's how the doctor explained it to me, that the tendons and ligaments, they'll grow to allow for the bones to grow. Well, when that slop is there, my daughter could literally, the first time she did this, she hung on a doorknob playing around. She was 4 years old and dislocated her elbow. And we took her to the doctor and they did the thing, and it literally would just pop out a place. To the point it happened enough where the doctor showed us how to put it back into place because she could just like pull on something and dislocate her elbow. And then everything grew into place and tightened up and we didn't have that problem anymore. But that's why it's so important to focus on, especially when you're a beginner or young, to focus on multi-joint movements that are helping you develop overall strength, not just in the muscle, but in the tendons and the ligaments and the joints as well. It's going to benefit you moving forward. So with that, let's move on to the next big one here, which is obviously the squat. That was one of my favorites. I love the squat. The squat is, a lot of people think, oh yeah, you're working your legs. Okay, yeah, you are working your legs, but you're working a lot. You're not just working the quads, right? We're getting into the quads, the abductors and adductors. We're getting into the glutes, the hamstrings, the calves, even the front, the shins, the muscles in the shins down into your flexors and your ankles, to your lower back, even, right? As we're squatting. So once again, multi joint movement. lots of muscles engaged, and an exercise that helps benefit overall strength. And with that, what Matt did a video on this as well. We're gonna watch that. This is like the chest video where he's showing proper technique. He's gonna show that here again as well. So let's cue that.
Okay, so now we're gonna talk the squat. So whether you're using a fancy machine like this where you can hydraulic rig and release the monolift here, or you have a rack, you know, two big things when you're squatting. One, you need to keep your head into the bar. So the bar is back, you gotta keep engaged into the bar. Everything tight up top. Second, whatever width of squat you choose to use, whether it's, you know, a narrow or a wide, super wide, you know, or somewhere in between. Yeah, I always gotta remember to keep the knees going out, right? The minute the knees cave in is when you got ACL and knee injuries written all over it, right? So when you go down, you can go down to match, parallel, or below, depending what you like. Depending on your mobility gets. If you can't get to parallel, then you need to work on that mobility to be able to get to parallel. Regardless, time under tension is king. So in a bodybuilding sense, you don't necessarily need to go all the way down. You'll get the most muscle activation the further down you go, as long as it's not too low, because then it turns into a different ball game. But creating that whole lower body, you know, lower muscle activation. If you can go down a parallel, squeeze it, to exaggerate what needs to happen. As you get down, it's an out and up, out and up. So that helps engage the glutes, the quads, and the hamstrings fully. But what I've noticed in some people is they forget that upper back needs to be tight. So they're just loose and droopy and trying to do all this lower body. A squat is a full body movement. Yes, your legs are all the way down lower back and below is getting a brunt of the work, holding and stabilizing the weight that's on your back. Except for the fact that the upper back is droopy, you're not stabilized. So keys there, upper back get tight, lower back stay stable, lower body and legs go squat down to parallel or below, drive out and up. So here's a little demonstration here real quick. So get tight under, head into the bar, up. We'll do a step back for this demonstration. Okay, upper back tight, head into the bar, squat down and up. Down, 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 out, up. That's exaggerated. So overall though, down, up.
All right. Once again, still loving them pants, Matt. Take us through that.
Yeah. So, you know, the biggest thing I've noticed in all my time squatting, and I actually just brought this up to James before we started this, is how important your upper back is in squat. And I say that because today my upper back is quite sore from squatting yesterday. And, you know, making sure that you have your, you know, similar to the bench, you have it not retracted to puff the chest out, but as you're getting the bar, you have to get your head and upper back into the bar. It's like almost shrugging, not quite shrugging into the bar, but you got the bar back there and now you want to get tight into it. So it almost comes into a shrug while you're squatting. Now, for me, you know, there's a lot of influencers and lifters out there that social media you can see where with squat, you have a high bar and a low bar. High bar, basically what that is, it sits higher on traps, almost on top of your spine. We'll call it the hump there.
Yeah.
Or lower, where it's almost like below the meat of your traps. Now, there's a point to both of those. If you're a quad dominant person, you're going to lean towards the low bar because you can lift more because it promotes quad activation. Your higher bar promotes a more straight up and down bar path and body movement, excuse me. And you know, that is more of a, I don't want to call it a back end posterior chain squatter, but it benefits a lot there. For me, I've been squatting high bar for so many years that I can't get my shoulders into place to do a low bar. So
Yeah.
So for me, I've worked so much on my hamstrings and glutes to make my squat better, squat stronger, that I couldn't even get in a position to do a low bar squat right now. Now, is there a purpose for both of them? Absolutely. there's no one way to skin a cat, as they say, right?
Well, it's
Every,
just
every
like the front bar. You can do it. You can do it on the front. You rest the bar up on the
yeah,
front, which is
absolutely
very focused on the quads. But you're right, though. I love how you point out that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I also like in that video how you really focused on the range of motion and being able to clear your hips and your knees by your foot position. Because I think that's very important, and I'd like you to elaborate on that a little bit because where we place our feet, whether we're toes in, toes out, a wider stance or a narrower stance, everybody's anatomy is a little different. And what happens is if you're in the wrong position, it's going to be very hard for you to get into a proper squat form at the bottom because what happens is the femur jams into the hip joint, into the socket there. There's no room for it to clear, and everybody's anatomy is a little different. By widening your legs or turning your feet out a little bit, that can help you clear. Some people can go very narrow and like literally put their butt on the floor.
right.
Talk about that a little bit, Matt. That importance of finding your foot position.
Right. And that's key because the point of the squat is not to go all the way down and, tickle your ankles with your butt, but it's also you have to get to the parallel portion or close to. We will talk a little bit about the depth portion and how that works. But the intention of the squat isn't to quarter squat and it isn't to, put your butt on the ground. It's not the point. Um, and so finding where you're at, I mean, naturally, each foot position works something different. However, to find the best position for you, it could be very different. Mine, I'm a wider squatter, and my right foot is actually kicked out. This is my right. So your right is kicked out a little bit like that. And that's in my anatomy. That's
Yeah,
it's how I'm made, and people tried to correct it, and it doesn't work. Trying to go
yeah.
straight on doesn't work for me. So I have one foot kicked out, usually my right foot kicked out a little bit. And that's where I've been, my sweet spot. And yes, that will work one area. And as I train personally, I train in all different stances, whether it's squatting, leg pressing, any of those. I vary those stances because there's a point to varying all those stances, similar to doing a box squat. There's a point to doing a high box squat, a full normal right height box squat, and a low
Hmm.
box squat. They all work different things. So find what works for you, and understand that you'll probably take flack for it because it's not like someone else does. However, it's what works with your body, and that's
Yeah.
going to set you up for the most success to grow your legs, to perform better, whether it's in football and just weightlifting like I like to do. You know, it's all going to be based 100% on you and what you can do.
Also like how you really focused on not allowing the knees to collapse because I see that especially when people are going heavier than they need to, their knees start to collapse. And like you pointed out in the video, you're looking to snap an ACL. You are not in a good, safe position when those knees go in. It's one of the reasons, like you say, about foot position. Like me, I'm fairly neutral, just about well, when I could squat, I can't now with the whole foot thing, but just a little outside the shoulder width, but I turned my toes out just a little bit because when I went straight footed, when I'd come up, my knees just wanted to come in. And by turning my feet out just a little bit, I was able to keep that wide base with my knees and not allow them to collapse.
I think that's huge, honestly, is with a slightly wider base, the minute your knees collapse, it puts a lot at risk. And
Hmm.
yes, you might not feel strong in there, but it's understanding the motion of out then up with
Yeah.
with the knees. And as you learn that, that will help put you in a better position. I still struggle with it to this day. My first few sets, they're light. I have no issues. The minute it starts to get, the three quarter, that 75%, 80%, one rep will cave in a little bit and it'll be like, oh, hello. Yeah, you don't want to do that
Yeah.
anymore. Let's pump the brakes.
Yeah.
Let's pump the brakes here and do this right. And there are times where and naturally, as I mentioned before, form breaks down the heavier you go. You're thinking too much. You're thinking about all these things. But as you ingrain through all the reps doing them right, they always say practice makes perfect. It's not practice makes perfect. It's perfect practice makes perfect. So
Yeah.
as you're warming up and everything, and you consistently work those knees out, then up, And guess what? When you get towards those heavier things, it's not going to be a, oh crap, I have to think that it's then out, then up. One more thing to add to what I think.
Yeah, and proper technique, it is so important. That's one of the things that, like when I'm working with new lifters, that's one of the things we focus on more than anything is proper technique. And we will adjust grip or foot position, different things until we find that. And I like how you said about the one thing with the squat. I see people that squat, they call it ass to grass. Um, if you're gonna go that deep, I recommend that you use a hack squat to go that deep because it provides some back support. When you get that deep, when you're literally sitting down, the amount of pressure that's on your knees and your back in that position can lead you to some troubles if you're not careful. When my guys to go really deep, which is when you get real deep, you're getting out of the quad, you're really stretching the quad, but you're kind of getting out of that and really engaging more of the glutes and the hamstrings, which is not a bad thing by any means. It's a good thing. I just myself and with my athletes, I much prefer to have them do that part on the hack squat. With an actual barbell squat, I usually try to get them to try to get in a comfortable position right at 90 degrees, parallel, maybe just a little below that, but not much more, right?
Yeah, so I think hack squat's a good one. There's are multiple bars out there. We have a couple of them at our gym, whether it's a spider bar or a safety squat bar.
Yeah.
Those two, I'm a little more okay with. If
Hmm.
I had to be okay with going ass to grass, because you can manipulate the height of the bar on your back with the
Hmm.
handles, and
Yeah.
so you have somewhere to help you in case you get stuck. Um,
That's like you could take the Smith machine and lean into it a little bit and almost create
right,
a hack squat, right?
right.
Similar thing. Gets that back in a much more stronger position when you're going that deep.
Right. When you have a straight bar, you can't manipulate where the bar is. When you have,
Right.
some of these other bars, like safety squat bar is one that I used this weekend. And I hate the way it feels on me, but I love, the flexibility of it and the good things that can come from using it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but you bring up a good point though. As you get lower and similar to in some of the form that I go through with your low back, especially in squatting, you know, there are a lot of people that can get hurt off squatting, especially in their low back. My
Well,
wife,
you notice, Matt, when they go super deep, it's hard to keep that bar balanced without rolling forward,
correct, correct.
right? And
And then
that's where
what do
that
you do
back
to hold it
support
up?
comes in handy.
Right. And how do you hold the bar up when it's rolling forward?
Yeah.
Tense it back.
Yeah.
That's when all that unnecessary, unnormal, completely, what is it, foreign to your spine pressure comes, and you have to push into it. And you're like, oh no, and then
Yeah.
and injuries happen. My wife's a good example. Like, she literally was getting ready to squatted down to tie her shoe. You could squat down to tie your shoe.
Yeah.
And she herniated a disc in her low back.
Yeah.
Once
I usually mess my back up picking a piece of paper off the floor, dude.
Right. And it's not that you have to practice squatting to pick up a piece of paper or practice squatting to tie your shoe, but it's unnatural positions you put your back in, and that's what can happen. And that's what squatting ass to grass can do. Am I against it? Absolutely not. If you can do
No.
it, you can, and you get benefit from it, more power to you. It's a warning sign to beginners that ass to grass isn't for a beginner. It's for somebody who's been doing it before and doing
Yeah.
it in
Well,
years and years.
because those the spinal erectors and all that stuff, as you squat more, they get stronger. Everything becomes more stable. That core gets more locked in, and the core is key here. In bench press, you're locking in the core. In squat, you're locking in the core. And as I've been studying kinesiology more and more, just the amount of pressure that the body can handle in proper position is immense
Mhm.
without injury. But the one problem is you get a little bit out of whack and things can fall apart very quickly. You can
Yep.
have multiple joint injuries squatting, just getting a little out of whack, right? Losing that form, and several things can happen. Like you were talking with those knees. Those knees go in and you jack up a knee and it drops you to the ground and your back rolls. Okay, now we got hips at risk for injury, knees already injured, your back's at risk, your neck's at risk. All those things just by getting out of proper position. You think about a building. If you build a building, a skyscraper, and it's off, it's not stacked right on top of itself. It's off a little bit. That is going to be more at risk for any kind of catastrophic failure because it's not the weight stacked on top of itself is built for strength. When you
Absolutely.
start getting it one way or the other, that's when injuries start to happen.
Correct. And that's there's also the big moniker out there for squatting. One thing I didn't cover, and I regret not covering this, but this is very important, is there's a couple accounts out there called Knees Over Toes Guy, I think is one of
Love
them.
him.
And there's some interesting. Squat University is a huge one. If you're interested in learning more about how the body works, there's a great one, Squat University. But there's the thoughts of knees over toes versus stacked shins versus what is the proper way. The proper way, honestly, is what works for you.
Yeah.
Because everybody's
100%.
body. I go back to Olympic lifting and CrossFit, and my knees, I could get my knees 4 inches past my toes at the bottom of a squat. Now I squat stacked. Why? I realize how much my joints hurt personally with my knees falling over my toes doing front squats, clean and jerks or snatches.
Yeah.
Right? So now that I'm kind of away from that and still squatting and still deadlifting, my body is working great with stacked joints. And I won't detract anybody from having their knees go over their toes. I will just say be careful.
Yeah, well, even knees over toes, guys. He's not doing that with massive amounts of weight. It's about strengthening the knee joint and the exercises that he goes over, like things like when you're dragging things backwards. That those different exercises that he does will help stabilize and strengthen the knee joint better. Which is a good thing. That doesn't mean that there's not a place for that stack. I mean, if you're going heavy, or if you're trying to focus the weight into a specific muscle group, which we're kind of getting out of the beginner level here, but as you start to advance in your lifting career and you're focusing on individual muscle groups, you will look at different positions to get the weight stacked onto that muscle, right? Because that's where time under tension comes, and time under tension is going to, help you build that muscle.
I agree.
So, and then now we've gone over bench press, we've gone over squat. Now let's get into the one that definitely is an ego lift for most guys.
Absolutely.
That would be the deadlift. How much can you rip off the floor? Right? And everybody wants to be able to grab some stuff and rip it off the floor, right?
Grip and rip, baby.
Grip and rip. But when you think about the deadlift, a lot of people, there's a school of people out there that say it's a leg exercise. There's a school of people out there that say it's a back exercise. Really, when you break it down, it's a whole body exercise. And I mean feet to your neck. Every bit of it gets involved in a deadlift. And let's watch Matt's training video on that, and then we will break it down a little bit.
All right, guys, now we're talking the deadlift here. A couple things to note here. In this setup, you've got a nice little jack to load the weights. We're not going to use any weights to show this, but overall with the deadlift, I sometimes, when I get kind of funky in my deadlift, I think of a squat. I think of the squat you just saw. For me, I do kind of a wider stance or more of a sumo deadlift. And I think of doing a reverse squat. Yes, the bar's up here versus here. However, it's almost the same motion, whether it's here, it's still pulling from the ground up, right? Instead of it being here, it's not here. Yes, it's harder to break the ground than it is to start up top, but similar kind of ideas. You push the ground away as the bar comes up. Yes, push the ground away as the bar comes up. And overall, still, lower body needs the most work. Most people think of deadlifts as a back exercise. Deadlifts are not a back exercise. Deadlifts are a full body exercise. Everything needs to be tight, from upper back to calves. Everything needs to be really taut in order to get a full pop exploded deadlift. Now, when it comes to conventional deadlift, being closer stance, whether you use mixed grip or not mixed grip, I would say if you're going to use mixed grip, vary it. That way your development could balance a little bit. But outside of that, it's still down, you're pushing the ground away as you try to keep that bar path dead straight, right? So once again, if you're doing this for power versus hypertrophy, two kind of different things. Hypertrophy, you can do tempos, but work on keeping that the same pace that your legs open up, your back opens up. And that's kind of a key here, because if you're bent over and you go, that's not going to work. So it kind of needs to be as a gradual open, all at the same time, is the perfect deadlift form. Once again, as you get heavy, form always breaks down. That's just a standard. Bench press, same thing with squat, same thing with deadlift. The heavier you go, the less perfect form you'll have. So you want to mitigate that. What can I do as it gets heavy to keep my form the best, but protect myself from the injury? So most deadlifts get a really bad rep for getting most injuries because you'll see the exaggerated slump over deadlift. There we go. You'll see the exaggerated slump over deadlift. That taxes the erectors and all the above, and you say, holy shit, that person's gonna hurt themselves. But really, if we're gonna go sumo here, hands tighter inside the knees, and you're going to head up, back, upper back braced, not droopy, and pop. It's a push the ground away as you extend those hips up, ground way up. And that's the best way it's helped me. Now, conventional, I do mixed grip with my right underhand. And bars below the knees, hands are outside the knees. Now, when you come up, once again, try to keep the bar straight as path possible. That's the shortest distance between 2 points to a straight line, right? So keep that in mind. And it's a simultaneous up from the legs extending and the back extending. So, head up, tight, pop. And always, key here, guys. The negative is just as much important as the positive. So CrossFit gives it a bad rep where CrossFit I don't love is they'll do 5 reps at 315 and just drop the bar from the top every time. When that's not really doing the full movement. It's not fully engaging in that deadlift. That's doing the concentric but not the eccentric. Sometimes that eccentric can be just as important as the concentric. So make sure you take those tips today and go get a better deadlift.
Okay, Matt, take us through your deadlift there.
Yeah, so the biggest keys for a beginner doing a deadlift is one, whether you use a conventional stance, which is basically your feet closer together with your arms outside of your knees, or you do a sumo stance with your legs wide and hands inside your knees. Both of them recruit a whole body's worth of muscles. I've had times recently in the last 10 months, because I had never felt this before this calendar year of training. I had never felt my pecs be sore from deadlifting. Now, how is that possible? When you think of all the tension you're having when doing that, everything in your body should be tense and tight, because the minute something's loose is going to put your body at risk for injury, especially in squat, especially in a deadlift, especially if you're thinking about how can I lift more off the floor, which is, putting every muscle of half the time, every cell in your body just to get there, because you'll do a heavy deadlift and your eyes, you start seeing stars, etc. So the key thing is making sure when whatever stance you decide to use, yes, do they apply a bit differently? Yes, but I won't. If somebody wants to start deadlifting, I will say which feels better to you and try them both, because you're not going to know just from being your first or second try deadlift. Mm-hmm. But the biggest keys there is once you find your stance, you have to understand that it's never just a bend over to the bar and just pull it off the floor. That's how you get hurt. It's definitely if the bar's on the floor, you'll get your stance and you have to squat to the bar. Will your hips get too low at that point? Yes. but you have to squat to the bar because you can't just bend over to the bar and expect it to move. So,
Yeah.
so the biggest key for me there is a lot of those things we just talked about in squat, where you have to have your hips tight, your legs, everything tight, especially your back. You have to get down to the bar, and all of that has to be, all be tight. I like to emulate doing my squat to get to the bar
Yeah.
because now I know that position. So I'm emulating my squat to get to the bar, to have everything tight, and then you can just work on pushing the floor away. If you push the floor away, the bar's going to come up. And
Yeah,
that's, I think,
absolutely.
that's an underrated cue that most people don't think of, is pushing the floor away.
I love that. I love that cue, and I love it for this. Most injuries occur in the deadlift when people try to yank the bar. They're trying to yank it off the ground. And because they'll either, a lot of people, when there's, and you pointed out in the video, you have a double forehand grip, or you can do a reverse grip. And a lot of people are like, I don't do the reverse grip because your biceps at risk. Well, yeah, it's at risk if you're jerking on it. And
Well,
why
it's
is
also,
that? You're creating slop.
right. It's also at risk if you're trying to curl it up because you can't lock it out.
Correct. But when you do that, when you get down, like you said, you kind of squat into it. Everything is locked in, and then you just try to, push. How did you say it? Push the
Push
floor
the
away.
floor away. Yep.
Yeah, you're pushing the floor away. It keeps everything tight. And like we talked about earlier, anytime the body gets off angle or in a bad position, that's when you're subject to injury. And if you keep everything locked in tight, you want to be looking up. You don't want to be looking at the floor. I mean, when I watch you deadlift heavy stuff, man, I mean, you're looking up. You're almost praying to the Lord trying to get that stuff off the ground, right? Because it keeps everything tight.
And honestly, it's all about stacking joints again.
Correct.
Right? And if your head's forward, guess what? Your joint's not stacked.
Mm-hmm.
You're putting yourself at risk for injury again.
Yeah.
So, one thing that I find extremely beneficial to beginners, we'll call it, is doing deadlifts from a rack. If I would have thought, I'm thinking about this now because a lot of people I see struggle getting the bar off the ground, but they can get it from, say, that they can do 2/3 of the motion, but it's that
Mm-hmm.
1/3 that gets hard. So, one tip for me is, if you're really struggling, you want to do the deadlift, um, and you started off the floor and you're struggling a little bit trying to figure out what works for you, I would say go into a rack and put the
Mm-hmm.
bar, if you're going to put your feet close together in a conventional stance, put the bar right at or just below your knees and start there and see how that feels. And then, you might have to adjust the rack height depending on your height and how you go. Then move your legs out wider and feel that. And if you're interested in potential, future competitions, then you'll figure out what's best for you. But it is not a back exercise. It is not a leg exercise. It is a
Mm-mm.
full body exercise, regardless of what
100%.
you use. And there's a lot of we'll call it, since you got the word slop on my mind today, there's a lot of slop out on social media about people doing sumo deadlift to build their booty. And there's a lot of stuff out there pulling conventional to get lower back work, right? There's a lot of noise and garbage in there. And yes, they might all work both those things. A sumo deadlift does work your butt, yes. Conventional, you can definitely get some good morning-like properties in there to work your lower back. But overall, this is a full body exercise, and you have to think of it as a full body exercise, or you will get hurt. Because
Yes.
you're not keeping all of those same things tight that we've talked about in the squat and the bench press. To do your deadlift and not yank it off the floor, you will get hurt. And you brought it up earlier about rounding of the back and how that can definitely lead to injuries because your spine is getting spaced out. And deadlifts is no different. I will say, and we've talked offline about this, is a little bit of rounding isn't bad. A lot of rounding is where it gets really bad.
Yeah.
Consistent rounding is no good. So that
Yeah.
the one thing I definitely want to hammer home to everyone is rounding bad? No. Is excessive consistent rounding bad? Bad. rounding of the back bad. Yes.
Yeah, typically when I see people get injured deadlifting, they will literally like stand up with their legs and their back is rolled over and the weight is literally hanging, right? And it gets away from their body, right? They've lost that path and they're rolled over. And that's usually when they end up tweaking something. You literally you watch guys deadlift, they dang near are dragging the bar up their legs, right? It never gets away. It never swings out. They stack everything on top of it. They push the floor down basically, and the bar stays in place. And that whole motion, like you said, it's a full body motion. All your muscles working, and you're standing up with it.
Yeah, and I mentioned it in the video. The quickest place from point A to point B and the strongest place from point A to point B is a straight line. The farther
Absolutely.
you deviate from that straight line, benching, squatting, or deadlifting, the A harder it's going to be, but also the B more at risk you're going to be.
Yep, absolutely. And we've gone through this. I hope that you guys have got some decent information. I think that Matt did a great job with those videos, explaining things. And if you notice in each video, he really expresses the point home about being planted in the movement. The bench press, your everything starts from the ground up, right? On these movements, whether it be the squat, the deadlift, the bench press, everything you want a good solid base. You want to be planted. You want things in proper position to help reduce injury. And he really did a good job with those videos. Matt, thanks again. You have anything final before we kick out of here today?
Yeah, one thing is definitely leave your ego at the door, especially if you're starting fresh with this. There's no shame
100%.
in only being able to deadlift or squat one plate. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in only being able to bench press 95 or even the bar until you get much more comfortable understanding how your body recruits it, how what you need, what levers you have based on your anatomical makeup. There's nothing wrong with that, and don't let anybody kind of try to sway you otherwise.
No, thanks. That is important. Just to reiterate, kind of piggyback on what you're saying there. A lot of people they come in the gym and they expect this to happen overnight. And I've said this many times that weightlifting, fitness in general, is not a game that is measured in days or weeks. It is a game that is measured in months and years. So focus on that form. Take your time. And when you look back a year from now and then 2 years from now, you will see the amount of growth and it will be exponential growth, especially if you're brand new. When you're brand new, the muscles tend to grow faster, you get stronger quicker. Then, they basically, a lot of guys will talk about, are you a beginner, intermediate, or expert lifter? And that has nothing to do with time. It has to do with how your body responds. So a beginner lifter, their bodies usually respond pretty quickly. They're going to have some pretty good growth. An intermediate lifter, it's a little harder to get that growth, but still fairly easy. And then an expert lifter, they're having to pull everything out of the gas tank to get just the smallest amount of growth. And if you consider yourself an expert lifter, you're probably not. I've been doing this a long time. I still wouldn't consider myself an expert lifter. I have not reached that point yet where I can still grow pretty easy. Um, if it's hard work, but I can still experience change and growth. I'm not like your professional bodybuilders out there or professional power lifters where they're having to put in an insane amount of work just to add 5 or 10 pounds to their lift or to add a couple of centimeters to their arm size or that's a totally different level. So but with that, if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'll definitely answer those. Don't forget to check out Matt Freaking Deakins. Check out his Instagram. It is at Matt Freaking Deakins, right? Is that it? Yeah. We'll list those again in the description. Matt has been a great contributor to the show. We thank you, love you, buddy. With that, you guys get out there and work hard, peoples, and remember, don't forget to smile. Thanks so much for watching or listening. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find us on Facebook at Work Hard Peoples LLC or Instagram at Work Hard Peoples LLC. You can also find us on our website at workhardpeoples.com. Have a great day or night. Don't forget to smile.